So here we are down the canal again, and this morning Pete and I over breakfast had a really interesting conversation about insecurity and its many forms and many disguises, and we just thought it'd be nice to record some of the stuff that we were talking about. So maybe you just kick off with, well, what do we mean when we use the word insecurity?
Yep, good place to start, definitely. Insecurity is one of those words with quite a few different but related meanings.
Yeah.
It's
a big one.
What we're going to be talking about is psychological and physical insecurity as it applies to a human individual. And now I will talk about how that kind of insecurity relates to the culture in which an individual is embedded, and the material world into which an individual is embedded. It's not possible to actually consider this without letting your thought move from a pure individual psychology towards considerations of society, social organisation, culture, nature, and so on. But I'm going to start with a human individual, and I would say that the human individual in any culture at any time is inherently insecure. And this means a couple of things. On the physical plane, if I can use a word like plane, what it means is that the body, the human body, is very, very vulnerable to injury and disease.
Yeah.
And it will die.
Yeah.
Pretty unequivocally.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure that everybody who's lived so far has died. and that makes me suspect that I will certainly die, and that all the people I know will die, and all the people currently alive will die.
Yeah.
That's the intrinsic insecurity of the human individual at its most kind of basic and irreversible level is physical mortality and vulnerability to physical suffering caused by disease and injury.
Yeah.
And that, I would say, that's what I mean by insecurity is a given of human life.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I mean, anyway.
Because not only do we know that we're going to die, but we also know that all the people we care about or depend on or love are going to die too.
Indeed. Indeed. And maybe the human species as a species is at some point going to die, and I think that is a concern also. And I think that's a given of our nature. If there is such a thing as human nature, it's got this kind of thing built into it. It's got a species concern as well. It's not a factor of life that consistently applies itself. It gets submerged very often as you see in tribal disputes or wars. The good of the entire human population goes by the board in those scenarios. But at the same time, every thinking, feeling person on the planet does have a concern at this moment about environmental degradation. You can't help it.
Yeah.
And it's not just an intellectual thing. It's quite visceral. It's felt. So that's the first thing there.
Yeah.
But there's also a psychological insecurity.
Yeah.
And I want to say a little bit about that here. It relates to the first one. It relates to physical insecurity. In as much as we can't help but form an idea about our situation in life that's informed and shaped by the fact that we're mortal and by the fact that we suffer, and we're very vulnerable to suffering. We're vulnerable to awful suffering.
Yeah.
That's going to have a psychological dimension, of course.
Absolutely.
But there are other types of psychological insecurity. There's insecurity that comes out of our relationships with others and with our surrounding communities. For instance, we may feel very insecure around status.
Yeah.
We may feel very insecure around things that matter in a particular culture, like a certain kind of body image or a certain kind of character. We may feel anxious in relationship to our peers because we think that our character doesn't measure up according to a shared idea of what a good character is, what a good person is. So we get those kind of anxieties in relationship to they consciousness, if I can put it like that.
Yeah.
But also there's another psychological insecurity, which again I think is a given of human life, more or less, and it's the kind of insecurity in which our ego, or our sense of I amness, our sense of a distinct identity, our sense of being a separate being amongst other beings, the way that is threatened internally, completely within the lived drama of a particular individual.
Yeah.
And that takes a couple of forms, and I would think in most people's lives, pretty well everywhere, under most circumstances, it's going to take the form of one's boundary, but feeling threatened by what we call the world.
Yeah.
Being threatened by the world.
Yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of dangerous things going on out there that might not only kill our bodies, number one, but also might discomfort us psychologically.
Yeah.
There could be such things as like losing face within a particular system of social value. Losing face, you know.
Yeah.
Or becoming bankrupt, being disgraced in public, committing a sin because some drive got the better of us, and then feeling guilty.
Yeah.
All this stuff coming from the world. Yeah. Doing things which give rise to consequences that are less than pleasant, that cause suffering. All of these things add to a feeling of insecurity. I mean, that's one. I'll call that the impact of reality on the ego. That's the impact of reality on the ego.
Yeah. Good line.
If I can do a little bit, steal some psychoanalytic terminology and put it to my own uses.
Yeah.
Yeah, the impact of the world on the ego is a very, very marked thing. You know? And it's almost like the ego's job is to interface the organism with the world, and particularly with the social world. It has this job.
Yeah.
But it's a job in which it intrinsically feels threatened, because the world has many forces in it which will discomfort or even destroy the boundary around the ego.
Yeah.
Of course, it's the nature of ego, again, intrinsically to it, is that it wishes to survive.
Yeah.
It wishes to survive. It's the relationship between the organism and the world that the ego enables, gives a particular role to the ego, and the role of the ego is to be in the business of ensuring the survival of the individual, of that individual instance of the human species. That's what its job is. So it's naturally on the lookout for threat.
Yeah.
So it feels insecure by its very nature.
Yeah.
By its very, very nature. Now the other place that ego gets trouble is it's day consciousness again, but it's day consciousness as internalised. It's the way in which there's a policeman in everybody's head.
Yeah.
And we loosely call it conscience, you know. Kant thought this thing was the voice of God in man.
Yeah.
I actually think it's the voice of the police in man.
Or
you
the
know.
voice of society, or how
Yeah.
you're told you should
Yeah,
be.
yeah. See, Kant thought it just kind of just dropped out the sky. But both Nietzsche and Freud, yeah, more or less, well, God gave it. Yeah.
Oh, right,
You know,
yeah.
But Nietzsche and Freud, following Nietzsche and building on it greatly, and passing it on to a whole host of disciples who developed this idea, was of the opinion that, well, it's actually formed through practices, through social practices, through
Yeah.
child rearing,
Yeah.
through your relationship with your mum and your dad,
Yeah.
and your siblings and the whole society. Or
You say it's the voice of your social conditioning.
it's the voice of a social condition, and there is a definite enterprise within all societies, because this is what makes them societies, of educating children, forming children, implanting the mores and values and customs of a society inside the individual, because it's far easier if the individual polices himself or herself
Yeah.
than if we have to have police for everything. We have to externally enforce stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
get
so-
them to do it to themselves.
Get them to do it. If you know, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
They're far easier to manipulate as slaves
Yeah.
if they got the microchip. I mean, in their brain. You know. I'm saying all this anxiety about the implantation of microchips and genetic engineering and da. I mean, actually, the microchips be there, mate. Every society puts one in a child.
Yeah.
It's called education. It's called
Yeah.
child rearing.
Yeah.
It's called the power of it's the power of custom,
Yeah.
and it's thy consciousness, basically. But this is not thy consciousness as we apprehend it in the social world. It's thy consciousness as it is internalised
Yeah.
into this thing that we roughly call conscience. Now, conscience gives the ego a terrible time. Ego is very concerned about status.
Sorry, say that again.
Ego is very concerned about status. It's a status monitor.
Yeah.
Again, in any society, ego is a status monitor.
And the status meaning like how you appear to other people.
Yeah, you are there's approving of yourself, but also being approved of by your peers.
Yeah.
It matters a lot to monkeys like us.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it should matter; it just does.
But it doesn't need to, though, does it? It doesn't need to matter.
Now we will get there in a bit.
Yeah.
Don't be in too much of a rush.
Yeah, I'll just-
Otherwise, you'll
I'm in a
turn.
hurry to get to that bit.
Otherwise,
Yeah,
I shall be turned into an agony aunt.
no. Okay.
I don't want to offer any advice to anybody. They can all fuck off. Now, ego is inherently concerned about status, and
Yeah.
but super ego or conscience, the place in your head, are always suspicious. They'll tell you that you're a pile of shit and an unworthy being, even if you actually tell the lie with absolute accuracy. You never do anything wrong.
Yeah.
You obey all the customs. You're a model citizen.
Still going to feel that.
You don't hurt other people. You don't kill. You don't steal. You're so upstanding, it's ridiculous, and you can feel as though you're unworthy and guilty in some way.
Yeah.
And this is again, it's stupid, but it's universal almost. This is I'm just saying this is how it works, just from observation.
Yeah.
And in fact, the intrinsic anxiety of the ego that's having to defend its boundary all the time against the world, it also has to defend its boundary against the hypercritical scrutiny of conscience, which most human beings have, and which is put there because conscience always encapsulates a received value system and a received set of commandments, you might say, and a received ethical table of rules. You know, so. But the ego, you know, does have this tendency to independence.
Yeah.
Which comes out of the fact that it tries very hard to maintain quite a strong boundary around itself. Look, you know, and it has to have a boundary around itself to be distinct. This is what ego is. It's the part of you that's distinct.
Yeah.
And that's self-consciously distinct. Therefore, it maintains a boundary. It's always on the walls of the fortress, repairing, putting a bit of mortar in, putting a brick back.
Yeah.
Because reality is kind of lobbing flaming balls at it,
so
you know, and rocks.
Takes quite a bit of energy and
it uses
awareness.
It uses up energy. It's a project.
Yeah.
It's actually a project for a life.
Yeah, and the higher the walls, the more energy it must take, I would presume.
Yeah. But at the same time, you know, the stuff coming from behind the lines, the superego posse are lobbying in.
So you're being attacked
basically
from front and behind.
Yeah, they're lobbying plague-ridden bodies.
Yeah.
So that we'll all kind of get something like that, and you know, it works in that insidious.
God, how do any of us manage to be happy, man? You know what I mean?
Well, this is why it's quite rare. But I mean, this isn't the end of it. This isn't the end of it, because not only that, underground there's some kind of.
Oh, there's something coming from underground as well.
Yeah. There's the creatures from the id.
No way.
The creatures from the id, and they're tunnelling to kind of pop up in the middle of the fortress ego, with a whole load of like really, really nasty shit from underground, like sex, hunger, aggression, all these kind of raw animal drives, if you want to call. I mean, Freud calls them drives, you know.
Yeah.
Instincts, whatever. But all these pretty animal impulses that are quite pressing in on the consciousness of a human being are also laying siege to fortress ego.
Yeah.
So it's getting it from three directions.
Starting to feel sorry for it now.
Yeah, it's getting it from three directions. And okay, I call that in intrinsic insecurity.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And it's intrinsic in the actual structure of the thing, in its very nature as a distinction. But it actually is insecure in this kind of much rawer and dynamic way, because the human organism that's been socialised into a society produces this split psyche, and obviously there are different ways of mapping the psyche. And that roughly Freudian one that I just gave you is only one. It's the kind of thing that you can map in a number of ways. But I think that map's quite a good one.
Yeah.
It's a crude sketch.
Yeah. It puts it helps it to put like a picture in your mind.
It puts a picture in your mind, and you can verify all of this stuff. Whenever I talk about it, people always laugh because they recognise it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, on the one hand, he goes, he's trying to be the diplomat with the world.
Yeah.
And keep the peace with the world, so the world's not going to be too threatening to it, and actually be able to do anything to it. But it negotiates with the world, what you might call reality. As far as the superego is concerned, well, it does have to put up a bit of a fight back in some ways, especially as the creatures from the id, and actually dangling some kind of fairly tempting carrots in front of ego, like sexual gratification and the pleasure that's involved in that, and perhaps the affirmation of being that people get through sexual activity.
Yeah.
Very often, not always, but very often. You know, confirmation that you exist as a you. Ego bloody craves that.
Yeah.
And some kind of sexual intimacy will momentarily satisfy that craving, even though not forever. You know, so the stuff that's coming up from the creatures of the id is fairly tempting. Ego wants to go along with it, but
it's not only attacking, but it's also tempting as well.
Yeah. But super egos turn around and say, "You better fucking not. You better not. We'll punish you."
Yeah.
And it might be that if you get caught, society will actually punish you.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah. But it might be that what you're doing is not against particularly the customs of a tribe of your tribe. But nevertheless, there's still some kind of cultural guilt associated with it, as there is particularly with sex. You know, and super ego will make you feel guilty anyway, even if society don't punish you.
Yeah.
You know, and it's basically the bit that can feel insecurity. The ego is intrinsically insecure, and as you know, in this kind of fairly complex fashion, which I've only managed to sketch there.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it feels insecure, and it will feel insecure.
Yeah.
It's a product of its situation.
Yeah.
And it's a product of its inherent nature. So at this point, I want to say a bit more about what I've called thy consciousness.
Yeah.
The term thy consciousness is actually I've stolen it and put it to my own use from Heidegger. He uses it a bit differently.
He uses it a bit differently, and of course I've related it to psychoanalysis. And Heidegger's notion of thy consciousness was something that he employed in his criticism of psychoanalysis. Yeah.
So just so people don't think, you know, any kind of scholarly wallers out there want to bite me on the arse about that and inflict some thy consciousness on me. I just want to say I'm putting it to my own use.
Yeah.
But it kind of, I think it works as a phrase.
It's a really good term.
Thy consciousness.
Yeah.
Now I've said that thy consciousness gets internalised through the processes of socialisation, education, child rearing, enculturation, etc. And I'm kind of very interested in the processes, in the detail of these processes, and in the way in which thy consciousness is dancing in every culture, the way it's marching through the culture, the way it's threaded through the culture into the weave of a culture, pretty well at every turn, like gold thread in a Kashmiri shawl or something.
Yeah. So thy consciousness being all about just how other people see you and how the reflections they give back to you about yourself. Yeah,
all that, but also about how those very processes are manipulated in order to produce behaviour.
Yeah.
These monkey packs are always trying to manipulate the behaviour. There's internal struggle between the bloody monkeys as to what the behaviour of the tribe will be, because they have infinite behavioural possibilities. That's what human beings have. We have infinite behavioural possibilities.
Yeah.
But in social living, some are selected for and encouraged, and some are discouraged. And this is very often done through the internalised thy consciousness, because you make a child feel guilty and miserable, therefore, for stealing some sweets out of the cupboard, and you modify the behaviour of the child.
Yeah.
Society doesn't want the child to steal, because it has a central value of property, which is a part of the social organisation, on which in fact the whole kind of infrastructure is built on the notion of property. Therefore we can't have people stealing. Therefore we train children not to steal, and we do it, and we make sure that they're really going to do this is going to hold good by putting it on a microchip and planting it in their brain, so that their consciousness is inside. But it's about eliciting behaviour. It's about making people do and behave in certain ways and not in other ways.
Yeah.
That their consciousness is. But it operates at all levels. It operates at the level of law. Obviously, you know, the state will punish you if you do X, Y, Z. Incarcerate you, kill you, chop your hand off in some countries, etc. Law. So through law, but also through custom. What will the neighbours think? is how that works.
Yeah.
The neighbours can put an awful lot of pressure on somebody just by thinking ill of them. And we do, as a species, desire the good opinion of other members of our species. And this is reinforced by the enculturation processes. So it's got like a lot of manifestations, this day of consciousness. There's all kinds of levels. And as I say, we do it to ourselves as well. It's as ubiquitous as the air.
Yeah.
Is the old day consciousness. But of course, you know, a society is generally an organisation in which power isn't shared equally. Some people have the power, for whatever reason, to shape the society, at least to some extent, and they're obviously going to shape it to their own ends, and in their own advantage in most cases. But there are also struggles as to who will shape the society and in what way they'll shape the society. It's called politics, you know.
Yeah.
And, it can take the form of Brutus stabbing Julius Caesar or David Cameron losing the election. It takes all kinds of forms, but nevertheless, politics, it struggles for power, part of human social existence. And there's a game going on of manipulating that social existence by manipulating the they consciousness.
Yes.
And hence a whole lot of cultural phenomena which are really interesting. One of which is
Very strange.
and very strange, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you really want to study this, you know, just think about the phenomenon of the Facebook like, or the Twitter follower, and the status involved in just the simple numbers. 1,000 likes, you know.
Yeah.
It's a real big stroke.
But not
So-
stroke in the sense of,
Yeah.
oh no, I'm having a stroke, I'm going to die kind of
I
stroke.
mean, not
It's
stroke like you stroke the cat, you know.
Like stroke the cat, yeah.
Yeah.
Make them purr.
Yeah, I'm going to get over it 'cause these bikes are coming quite fast.
There's a lot of bikes today.
Yeah. So what I wanted to say there, there is a game played out in amongst all this stuff that's relevant to our insecurity, of actually making us feel insecure, even more insecure. We're intrinsically insecure. If you don't handle that situation intelligently, it's likely to be painful to you and frightening. You're going to feel anxious.
Yeah.
The intrinsic insecurity of the human animal, both physical and psychological,
Yeah.
is likely to give rise to anxiety in individuals. And it does. It doesn't have to. You can deal with it more intelligently than that. And that anxiety is very easily manipulable. So there's an entire industry, certainly, well, I think again globally almost, you know, certainly in the modern world, if you want to call it that, there's an entire industry given over to the manufacture of dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
In other words, anxiety that builds on the intrinsic insecurity of human existence and the intrinsic insecurity of ego.
Yeah.
It aggravates it, it inflames it.
So like advertising.
Yeah, advertising in order to exploit you.
Yeah.
And you could say certainly with the Western postmodern consumer capitalism, its motor in some ways, or one of its motors, certainly is the manufacture and exploitation of dissatisfaction. And it's the dissatisfaction that you can build on, that you can exploit because of the intrinsic insecurity of the ego and the body. So I mean, just if you want to just see this point, just watch loads of adverts.
Yeah.
And especially look at body products, deodorants,
Oh yeah.
things for getting the air off your fanny. I don't know, just
Perfume.
stuff to make you thin.
Yeah.
You know, so think of all the anxiety that's created and exploited. Think of the billions and billions of dollars that flow in the economy because of people's anxieties.
Yeah.
which are basically unintelligent reactions at the end of the day to the inherent insecurity of human life.
Yeah.
So there's a whole fucking industry, to the extent that I think if everybody gave up on it, the economy would
I was
collapse.
just going to say that. And then just
Yeah.
imagine what
Yeah.
would happen if everyone in the world
Yeah.
suddenly stopped
Yeah.
being anxious
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
thought, oh, I'm not going to be bothered with they consciousness anymore because that's a pile of shit.
Yeah.
I've seen through all that now. I'm just going to be free and be happy.
Yeah.
It would be, oh God.
You're not going to be spending money on I don't know, nose hair trimmers or whatever. I don't know.
No, so true. No.
Anyway, so that's a kind of a bit of a diatribe around thy consciousness. Now, the other, what I wanted to say here is that spiritual people are very often following some prescription for dealing with the conundrum that I've outlined. You know, for dealing with the anxious feelings produced by various manipulations of intrinsic human insecurity. But I'm wanting to say that for all that, they're still in the marketplace
Yeah.
of thy consciousness.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Spiritual culture is as suffused with thy consciousness and all the drawbacks of that as everything else. And in our modern world, spiritual life, having a spiritual life, doing something about your situation of insecurity is a product in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it's actually it's kind of been, that is the way in which it's been just co-opted.
Yeah.
So it's not going to form any.
It's basically just.
Yeah.
It's got a different dress on.
It's got
Hasn't
a,
it? That's
it's
all.
the same crap in different garb.
Yeah.
It's the same old crap in different garb. And you can kind of feel, oh, I'm a Buddhist, I don't feel so insecure now because I've got some belief.
Yeah.
And Christian missionaries play on this like fucking Yehudi Menuhin on a violin, man. They don't give up on you.
Nice.
You know, and the whole caboodle, and particularly yoga, being we kind of style ourselves yoga people somehow, whatever that means, but the modern yoga culture is absolutely shot through with this shit.
Yeah. Such a shame.
Yeah. Someone's been trying to get me to buy a computerised yoga mat or something that's got pressure sensors and it tells you if your feet are aligned and stuff on the mat and shit like this, and they let me have it on a free trial and blah blah.
Yeah.
And I go, what? And I get like 10 emails a day about this. And I'm like, what the
Trying
fuck?
to sell you yoga products
Well, not only that, but
with the yoga industry.
yeah,
Yes.
but not only that, but something that I'll plug into the computer and it'll kind of analyse my foot pressure. Then I can get all fucking neurotic about my big toe, like a lot of people unfortunately do.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm wanting to place as a modern spiritual culture, and I'm pretty well including spiritual culture per se, as we've had it so far, as something that is deeply shot through with thy consciousness. Now, in itself, it's neither here nor there, and thy consciousness isn't entirely bad. You know, children have to be educated.
Yeah.
No two ways about it.
Yeah.
You know, but what I object to, in very many instances of our modern spiritual culture, is the fact that it's disguised. You know,
Yeah.
it's shot through with thy consciousness. At the same time, a claim is made that this is where thy consciousness cannot reach. It claims a universality and absoluteness for itself. Whilst at the same time being just as human, all too human as everything else. You know, has been mixed up with marketing of products, policing individuals, manipulations of social power. And if you study history, I mean, one thing that hits you right between the eyes is that organised religions exert political power. In other words, they shape people according in certain patterns that suit certain people.
Yeah.
Again, fair enough. This is what happens. But these wallers at the same time are lying about it, or at least they're in a delusional situation with regard to that fact.
Yeah.
Everything is expressed as this great universal, you know. Thou art that. God is love. As though there was no they consciousness anywhere to be seen. But all this shit, shot through with it. And the way that this kind of pans out in practice, in actual religious practices, it comes down to one thing almost. One thing sitting under all the variations. There are infinite variations on the surface, but one kind of kernel to this, and that's the idea that you can destroy the ego. Because a lot of the world's spiritual traditions, the big ones, have all identified what Freud identified: the conflictual nature of human inner life. As soon as human inner life emerges historically, as soon as it has the conditions to emerge, and behaviour stops being automatic, you get the conscience, ego, creatures from the id scenario. Freud wasn't the first to spot this. It's been known for thousands of years. But the solution has been, you know, the diagnosis is kind of correct. We're conflicted inside, and that makes us feel very, very insecure, and it's an anxious feeling. So therefore, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll kill the ego.
Yeah.
And then it'll all be different. The dynamic will be different, and it'll all go along swimmingly. And this is an idea that you can find. You study history back to the times of prehistory. You'll find this idea popping up all over the place. All kinds of different cultures.
Yeah.
Vastly different cultures. But you have that idea comes in, and it arises when it's realised that there's this kind of conflictual nature to our lived experience.
Yeah.
Which we don't like, because it's anxiety.
It's painful.
Anxiety is painful. It's suffering.
Yeah. And
And
we're always trying to find a way not to suffer.
Yeah, that's it. But the solution looks very sweet on paper, doesn't it? You know.
Yeah.
Oh well, you know, this is the part that's fucking it up here. It's trying to like usurp everything. It's trying to build this fortress inside the organism. And it's acting like a dictator.
Yeah.
It's selfish, because the ego's job is to defend the individual organism, not the species, not the tribe, but itself. That's why it has to have the police inside it to moderate that tendency. So on paper it makes a kind of a bit of sense. Well, if that's out the equation, all we need is a nice system of laws for governing with the instinctual stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have like marriage laws, bride bartering, rules of succession, you know, the patrilineal or matrilineal, all that. But you have a bit. The ideal then, you know, the ideal that's behind this notion that you can kill the ego and you should kill the ego is of a totally regimented society.
Yeah.
In which there might be a law that say you can have sex on the Thursday and only with your wife or your husband. But on Christmas Day you've got to use girl on top and with somebody who's not your wife, preferably your wife's sister. More brain, you know, and you know, you think I'm making this up, but there are all kinds of rules like that in different societies. You study those rules,
there are.
Yeah. But the point is, and a lot of our kind of spiritual wallers don't realise this, is that when they're kind of preaching kill the ego, they're basically speaking up for a robot zombie society.
Yeah.
That's fascistically organised, like an anthill.
Yeah.
That's what they're speaking up for. So, but there's an even more fundamental criticism of that, the idea that you kill the ego, you starve the ego, you have a project of practices which slowly whittle it away, whichever way you want to look at it, or you get some guru to look deeply into your eyes and that explodes it. All this shit. What's not realised there is that the more you try and kill it, the more you feed it. Trying to kill it gives it the strength to re-establish itself. You know. Nobody spotted this better than Nietzsche, I don't think, actually. I think his analysis of that is brilliant. And he uses different terminology from what I've just used, but he kind of comes to a similar point.
Yeah.
I mean, you kill your ego, but the agent that did the killing then takes the throne.
Yeah.
It's just a palace revolution.
Yeah.
You know, and this one might wear some orange robes, change its name.
Yeah.
Still fucking ego.
Yeah.
Actually, it's still the same old ego.
Yeah, just in a different dress. Yeah.
Just popped into the closet and changed its dress, you know.
Yep.
So that's a non-starter.
Now you would have thought they would have noticed that after a while.
Well, a few people noticed it, but they didn't have the loudest voices, and they didn't have the ear of the military force.
Yeah.
In other words, the politics. You know, it was the followers of St. Paul who got the ear of Constantine and his wife, and thereby took a prominent place in the political unfolding of Christian Europe.
Yeah.
Via initially the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Brilliant masterstroke, you know. But it was the followers of Paul who was a super ego man.
So we can't diminish the discomfort and the anxiety that the ego can create for us by force or by will or by fighting it. We can't. That's not going to work.
Doesn't work.
No.
Doesn't work. It's just it's built into the logic of that particular psychic structure of a socialised human being in any society, with the conflictual nature that's imparted, and which actually in our current historical juncture is incredibly intense. You know, all this stuff reached a pitch culturally. Modern individuals are in great tension through the new ways, the relatively new ways in which their consciousness is manipulated.
Yeah.
So the spiritual wallers, they get it wrong at this very, very basic fucking level. And again, there's exceptions. You'll find it here, there, and everywhere again. But it's the quieter voices. It's because the voice.
What are the quieter voices saying?
Well, they're saying you can't uproot or kill the ego.
Yeah.
Because whatever it is that does the killing or the uprooting becomes ego. Is itself ego.
So we've just been talking about many of the ways it doesn't work. We want to think about how uncomfortable and anxious and painful this attack on the ego is, and we realise this, and we would like to not be suffering so much.
Of course.
And personally, that's a conclusion I came to a long while ago.
Yeah.
So if somebody was asking you that question, as I'm sure people do, what's got anything to say for them?
Yeah. There's a lot to say about that, really. Well, I know I said it 54,000 times in the last half an hour, but number one, remember, you can't sort this out by attempting to kill the ego.
Yeah.
It makes matters worse, if anything.
Yeah.
Try it. Don't take my word for it. Try it, but
do you think it's necessary to try that first?
No. I know, but anybody who's really sceptical, let them try it. But I was going to say, bear in mind that your life is ebbing away while you're doing this.
Yeah, I don't want to waste too much time.
So, but if you want to take my word for it, just study it a little bit. I don't mean studying books, study it in yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's a dead loss, and it is intrinsically a waste of time.
Yeah.
So you think, well, what can be done about this?
Yeah.
And what can happen is that we can be alert in that Patanjali sense, you know, just having to go being alert to what's going on.
Yeah.
And if you are, you've got quite a good chance of spotting that the supposed hard fortress wall around the ego, the sense of being a separate something, is actually not a hard 6 foot thick stone fortification, but something rather more flimsy than the soap bubble.
Yeah.
But this is something to see. I mean, being told it's kind of is not that helpful, except that it points in a direction where you might explore a little bit.
In the way that I found that helpful in the past, though, is that sometimes if somebody says something like that to you,
Yeah,
what it gives you is a new way to explore something.
that's right. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right? So you think, okay, well, Pete said that it's like a soap bubble. It's not actually like this big fortress I think it is.
Yeah.
So let's just explore that.
Yeah.
And sometimes these, just like one sentence sometimes like that can just give you this different perspective, a different way to explore that's massively useful.
Yeah.
And it can lead to like a really big realisation.
Great.
I mean, certainly that's what happened to me.
That's certainly the way. If there is anything going to work out of this kind of discussion, is it in that manner, as a sort of a pointing or a suggestion that acts as a bit of a seed.
Yeah.
For some inquiry or some movement in a direction, something like that.
Yeah. To look at something.
Yeah,
in a
that's
different way.
cool. I mean, that does happen, and it's invaluable, absolutely invaluable.
And when I looked at it, I found, because, you know, I've been with you for many years, and whenever you've said anything like that to me, I've always thought, well, okay, that sounds good, but I'm not just going to take that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go away and really explore it and see if he was right. And I often find out that you are.
That's gratifying.
But maybe if I like wander off and make a few mistakes myself and then think, oh yeah, Pete was right. But that idea that the fortress is really an illusion.
Yeah. Not only that, I want to say. Not only is the fortress nature of ego an illusion. It's a part of the illusion that arises out of thy consciousness. The ego believes of itself that it's a thing and a fortress. It believes that's what thy consciousness does when it constitutes ego. It implants within it, as an absolutely essential part of its dynamic, the notion that it's a thing and that its boundary is a real boundary.
Yeah.
There is a meditative insight available to human beings fairly easily, I think, that the walls of the fortress are now have got less substance than a soap bubble.
Yeah.
In fact, the ego it's not a thing.
No.
It's not a thing in any ordinary sense of thing.
Might I say that for me, the way that my idea of myself and my ego changed from being a thing to not being a thing was we're looking at some ducks. Oh, ducklings! Oh yeah, the babies have arrived.
Sorry, I couldn't. I got sucked in there.
So the
changeable.
For me, the realisation that the ego, the self, was not this a thing like we described, because I started to experience myself in a different way and found that I was constantly changing. I was fluid.
Yeah.
Therefore, it cannot be a solid a thing.
Yes,
it's like, how
that's it,
can you
yeah.
defend something
Yeah.
which is in constant flow and change?
As a thing,
The
yeah.
only way you can defend a thing is the thing remains the same, or you
Yeah.
believe that it remains the same.
Yeah.
But there is no way it's possible
Yeah.
for us humans
Yeah.
to remain the same,
Yeah.
even from moment to moment.
Yeah. And that's not particularly difficult to observe, is it?
No.
So since it's fairly easy to observe, it's a testament to the power of thy consciousness, and everybody misses it.
Yeah.
And that societies carry on being fascistic.
Yeah.
So they made quite a cunning job of that.
So that was the very simple thing that
Yeah.
that changed everything for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me
Yeah.
a while to get there.
Yeah.
But you know, in your meditation, it's if you think again, if you have a little bit of a pointer to perhaps explore
Yeah.
yourself and look at yourself
Yeah.
in a slightly different
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
and you start to see the flow and see
Yeah.
how you're constantly
Yeah.
changing from moment to moment. It's like you don't really. It's like the
Yeah.
impetus to defend and defend and defend just really starts to drop away.
Of course it does. Yeah. There's nothing to defend.
Well, that's it. Yeah.
You know. So the tragedy of generations upon generations of human beings expending their lives on projects of defending the fortress when there was never
in the edifice.
there was never a fortress anyway.
No.
Or the equal tragedy of generations upon generations of human beings attempting to kill the fortress,
Yeah.
defeat the fortress, break it up into rubble as a life project when it never existed anyway, never had inherent existence anyway. So fuck, this is heavy duty shit, man.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think we're kind of getting the right carvers there. So I'm just going to say a few things and we'll
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah. Round it off.
Round it off.
Yeah. End with a, what's the punchline for
Yeah.
this talk? Would you say?
Well, Alan Watts, the great Alan Watts, wrote a book late on in his career. I think it was called The Wisdom of Insecurity. And it's a bit of a pamphlet, for kind of beatnik, beatnik ideals or something, or Zen antinomianism or something like that. I don't know, but it's beautifully written. It's very short, and I was in the habit for years of giving it as a birthday present to people who I knew. So I buy 3 or 4 copies at a time and give them that. So some of this stuff is indebted to that. I express it differently. I'm using different ingredients. I think Watts was painting in watercolours and I'm here with some heavy duty acrylic or something.
Yeah.
It's like that. But have a read of that, and that would be my message. Actually, is from deriving from this analysis is find the wisdom of insecurity. And that consists of a few things. Firstly, realising and fully taking it on board that human life is inherently insecure, physically and psychologically. The ego, which is a formation that gets stronger the more kind of organised and complex a society becomes, is also intrinsically insecure. It's built right into it. Not only is it built right into it, it's built right into it on purpose through social customs. Realise that insecurity is something you can live with. The problem's not that. The problem is the anxiety that the insecurity causes, and the fact that anxiety is manipulated in any culture.
Yeah.
Usually for fairly nefarious reasons or reasons of power.
Yeah.
Realise that. Realise it by seeing it. and then know that you don't have to have that anxiety,
Yeah.
because the anxiety is based on the idea that the ego is a thing. The most fundamental anxiety from which all other anxiety derives is the ego's fear of loss of its boundary.
Yeah.
So it constructs a fortress-like boundary, but only in imagination. In reality, the boundary is non-existent. The ego has no inherent existence.
Yeah.
You can't replace the ego through ascetic practices. You can't kill it. And all manner of stupidity arises out of the attempt, which the attempt has beguiled millions and millions and millions of human beings over history.
Yeah.
But you can't. It's logically impossible. It's actually impossible. What can happen, as I mentioned earlier, is that you can see through it all. You can see through. You can actually see with the clarity of day exactly how all this works, and exactly how there is no inherent existence where you thought there was one.
Yeah.
And in that instant of realisation completely rearranges everything,
Yeah.
at the same time leaving everything the same.
Yeah.
It's very peculiar.
It is very peculiar, yeah.
But
Everything's different, but everything's still the same.